Hi, welcome back to My Smart Learning. This is a lesson for Year 12's A-Level Biology. If you're doing GCSEs and other subjects, you don't need to watch this, but if you're Year 11 thinking about doing A-Level Biology, this will be really, really useful for you. And actually, a lot of the stuff is in your GCSE Biology too. So, what we're looking at today, we're starting in chapter 10 in the Caboodle textbook, and we're looking at, let me go back a notch, we're looking at species. So what we are going to do is we're going to start off with our recall quiz, high five. What are species is our objective, and now we have looked at this last time, but number one, what are the three types of adaptations? Number two, directional selection. Can you just quickly sketch out the graph of what directional selection looks like? Number three, can you draw the sketch of the graph of what stabilizing selection is? And can you just give a quick explanation behind those guys as well, a description? Number four, disruptive selection. And number five, what do I mean by polygenes? So this is what we looked at last lesson. Can you answer those questions as a quick starter activity, high five? Pause the video, and I'm going to go through it with you guys in a sec. So if you've unpaused the video and you've had a go at those questions, all right, so make sure you've got the graph of the sketch of the graph and a little explanation behind these type of selection. All right, number one then. So the three types of adaptation we talked about was number one, anatomical, number two, physiological, and number three was behavioral. Now the examples we gave last time was things like the anatomical is like the physical features. So for instance, the color of your wings on a peppered moth. The physiological is the biochemical reactions that happen and also sort of physiological mechanisms that happen within an organism. And then the behavioral was an example of things like flying south for the winter. What do I mean by directional selection? Directional selection, on the graph, you'd get a normal distribution and it shifts all the way to the right, or it shifts all the way to the left. Okay, so the stabilizing selection was where your normal distribution starts off as your normal bell-shaped curve, but you squash it so that the left and the right get squished inwards and the mean rises and it goes higher because there's more of them along that mean area. And the disruptive selection is we start off with a normal distribution, but it gets squashed down from the middle, so you end up with a normal distribution on the left, so you get a curve on the left, there'll be space, and then there'll be a curve normal distribution on the right because you've squashed it down in the middle. And we use the example of the peppered moth, so you've got two different distinct types now. And the last one, polygenes or polygenetics, is to do with many genes. So there's many genes that are interacting to give that particular characteristic or feature. So rather than monogenetic. What we're focusing on today, what do I need to know? We're going to look at this definition of species, and we're going to look at how species are named, and we're going to look at something called courtship behaviours. Now, I've split chapter 10.1, that first lesson, into two sections. So I'm going to teach it over two lessons because it's such a massive section. It's like 4 or 5 pages, 6 pages in the textbook. So rather than spending ages going through it, I'm going to split it up into two distinct parts, but it is all part of one lesson. So what is a species, how are species named, and these idea of courtship behaviour? Well, species then, what is the definition of a species? So this picture will come up in a second. So the definition, we looked at this last time, they're a group of organisms that have similar features and they are capable of breeding to produce living, fertile offspring. So living, fertile offspring. So they need to be alive. And they need to be able to grow up to adulthood and reach sexual maturity and produce babies themselves in the end. So are lions and tigers the same species? That's the question I'm asking you. So here I've got a picture. Do you recognise this animal? Well, this animal does look a little bit like a lion, but if you notice, it's got some stripes back there. It's actually a hybrid of a lion and a tiger. It's known as a liger. Now you might think I'm lying or joking, making this up, but if you just Google it, there are ligers that exist where you name them after the father, then the mother. So if the dad was a lion and the mum was a tiger, you'd get a liger. Okay, so you get a liger there. Now, are they the same species? If it was the other way around, if the dad was the tiger and the mum was a lion, you'd get a tigon, which sounds a bit odd, but that's what you'd get. But are they the same species? The answer is no. They come from the same family, okay, the Felidae family, the cats, but they're not the same species. How do I know? Because this liger is infertile. It's produced, these guys have produced living offspring, but it's infertile, so it's not the same species. So ligers can't produce liger babies. So what about horses? Are horses and donkeys the same species? Again, the answer is no. What do they produce? Well, they produce what we call mules, or an ass, or sometimes what you call My Little Pony, right? Now, why aren't they the same species? Because it's to do with the mule, or the ass, is infertile. Well, why is it infertile? Well, if I look at the diploid number of chromosomes in the somatic cells, and when I say somatic, I mean like the body cells, not the gametes, it's got 64 chromosomes. The donkey, somatic chromosomes, 62 chromosomes, okay, so in their body cells. However, let's say the horse is the dad and the donkey is the mum, the horse will produce sperm. The sperm will have the haploid number of chromosomes. So instead of 64, it'll have 64, it'll be 32. It'll be 32 chromosomes. However, the donkey, the haploid number will be 31. So if they do mate, the 32 sperm chromosomes, 32 chromosomes in the sperm, and the 31 chromosomes in the egg, when they fertilize, when they fuse, will produce 63. Now 63 will be the diploid number in the somatic cells, so it is in the mule cells, but when the ass or the mule, they produce sperm or eggs, can you split 63 in half? No, you can't. So because you can't half that, you can't make a haploid number from this particular 63 diploid number, the gametes are incompatible, they're infertile, okay, they won't fuse. So mules can't make mule babies, ass babies can't make ass babies. Now, what about zebra and a horse? You get a zorse. Yep, it's true. You get a zorse. Again, they're not the same species. What about a zebra and a donkey? You get a zedonk. Again, they're not the same species. What about naming species then? How do we name species? We use something called the binomial system. The binomial system. The binomial system is based on a two-name system. Bi meaning two, like bicycle, two wheels, bi. And nomial comes from the word nom, binomo, Mr. Mian. Nom means name. So two-name system. And it was introduced or designed by a Swedish botanist, a Swedish guy who's worked with flowers, Carl Linnaeus, right? Carl Linnaeus came up with this system. And it's a universal system, which means every country in the world, no matter what their language, use this, okay? Because the language is one particular language. It's got a mixture of Greek and Latin in there, okay? And we write it in italics. And the first thing we do, the first name has a capital letter, and the surname will have like a surname will have a small letter. Okay, so the first name has a capital, the second name is all in small case. And it's universal. So how do we name it? We name it using it's a two-name system. We use the generic name first, or the genus name, and then the second name is its specific name or its species name. So we're known as, you can spot the mistake here that I've made, we are known as Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens, Homo sapiens. Now the mistake I've made here is that I forgot to put a capital H for the Homo. So because the first name is always in capital, so Homo, so that's the genus name, the species name is sapiens, so Homo sapiens. Lions are known as Panthera leo. So next time you go on a school trip, or I should mention school trip because you all stop shouting school trip at me now when we go on a school trip. When you go to the zoo and you look at the lion enclosure and you're looking at the lion and you're looking at the label next to it and all the information about the lion, you'll see it'll say lion, and right underneath it in italics, because it's always in italics, you'll see the word Panthera leo. What about the tiger enclosure? You'll see Felix tigris. Okay, Felix tigris. Now, again, look, capital letter for the first name, it's in italics, second name starts with a smaller case, but both are in the family of the Felidae. They are both cats. The Felidae family, the cat family. However, they're not the same species, because this is their genus species name. They're not the same species, so they will produce infertile offspring. If you watch Ratatouille, that cartoon, the Disney cartoon with the rats, Ratatouille, at the beginning you'll probably notice it's called Rattus ratus. That is the genus species name for the common rat. Okay, so that's how we name our species. Now, we're going to look at the classification system next time. That's going to be our next lesson, which we'll look at next week. The second part of this lesson. This is 10.1. 10.1 starts off with naming species, the notion of what a species is. Then it comes on to courtship behaviours, and then it'll go on to classification. But the classification I'll split up, and I'll do that on our next lesson. So courtship behaviours then, what is courtship behaviours? Courtship behaviours is all about attracting the opposite sex, okay, of the same species. The whole purpose is to see, do you recognise this particular organism as the same species as you? Now obviously courtship behaviours, you probably recognise them in humans, because humans have very strange courtship behaviours. When the guys are trying to attract a girl, he'd either try to splash the cash, show them how much money he's worth or his net worth, because ultimately what this courtship behaviour is about attracting the opposite sex to make sure that that organism is the same species as you, or you're wasting your energy during sexual intercourse because your gametes are going to be incompatible. They're not going to fuse, they're not going to produce a fertile offspring. And ultimately what this is all about is legacy, is passing your genes to the next generation, and then they can pass it to the next generation, and generation after generation after generation, because ultimately your legacy is what you leave behind on this planet. Now you could be super rich and famous and have power and have a huge tower built after you, like Trump, like Donald Trump has a big tower, Trump Tower, or you can have pyramids left behind because you're a king or something like that, or a wall, like Trump wall will be there even after he's dead and be there for decades or so. But eventually all these things will come to an end, okay? The only thing that can be left behind of our species is our genetic code. Our genes are the things that we pass on from generation to generation to generation. That's all we got left. If we don't pass it on, if we don't have children and grandchildren and so on, there'll be nothing left of us once we perish and die. Now, a bit of a spoiler alert, the only certainty in life is death. So you're born, what's definitely going to happen to you, all of us, no matter how rich and famous we are, we're going to die at some point. So if that's news to you, I'm sorry for bringing that news to you if you've not heard that before, but it's true. And what are you going to leave? You're going to leave your genes. And how are you going to leave your genes? You're going to pass it on through sex. So sexual reproduction is all about how do we get to that point of sexual reproduction? Courtship behaviours. First thing is, why do we need it? Is to recognise your own species. You need to identify that mate is capable of breeding. So you'll see dogs sniffing around other dogs, sniffing their backsides, whatever, because they're trying to smell to see, are they compatible with themselves? Can they breed? Are they the same species? Okay. You obviously want to be mated with the same species because you don't want to end up in prison if you're a human doing the wrong thing. So why? Because you need to form a pair bond. Okay. You'll be walking hand in hand with your pair bond, not hand in hoof with a little sheep or something, because that would be wrong. So don't do it. So what are these courtship behaviours? So we said splashing the cash, but it could be obviously the adaptations that we talked about previously, those features that you have. You could be faster, stronger, more muscly, better looking, chiseled jaw, cleverer. These are adaptations. They're not courtship behaviours. They're adaptations that they may be attractive to the opposite sex. However, the courtship behaviour is the thing that gets you to form that pair bond, because you are going to try to synchronise your mating. Okay, so to synchronise mating, you need those courtship behaviours. So things like singing. So you've got birds singing to each other to find the right frequency, the right pitch, so they can pair up and realise that, oh yeah, we are in the same, singing off the same hymn sheet, so to speak. Do you like that pun? But they're making sure they're the same frequency. Are they the same type of bird? dogs will smell pheromones. Okay, mammals will smell each other. They leave their smells behind, their scent. It's the pheromones. Dancing, you'll see birds, humans even, dancing away because they're trying to attract the opposite sex. The peacock will show its feathers and fan them out. Okay, and might do a funny little dance because they're trying to form a pair bond so they can synchronize mating and then become able to breed. Okay, they need to make sure that their anatomies are compatible, like the penis can fit the vagina. Okay, they need to have the seasonal breeding as well. So some organisms will breed at different times of the year, will become fertile at different times of the year. So therefore, they need to be the same species. So the same species will be in the same time frame when they can breed, because you might have different time lags between different types of organisms breeding. Okay, so they might be geographically isolated, so they can't breed. Okay, so they need to be near each other. They need to be breeding. They need to be fertile at the right time of year. Okay, that's why at springtime you got all the lambs, baby lambs, and the baby chicks and stuff, all in the farms, because they've been breeding at a particular time of the year, and that's when the offspring are being produced. Okay, so that's your lesson on what species are, how we name species, and the purpose behind courtship behaviours. I hope this has been useful for you. If you've learned something today, make sure you watch the videos, you like the videos, you share the videos, and you're obviously subscribing to the videos. And I hope to see you next time on My Smart Learning, which will be next week, when we're going to look at classification of these species, of how we name them and how we group them in our taxonomic groups. Okay, I don't want to do it all together in one time because it would have been far too much in one lesson. So make sure you're using all your computer books and your CGP books. Miss Martin's also giving you resources for her areas on Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 on genetic diversity and biodiversity. And I will go on to classification next time, which will be next week. So see you then, take care, and high five, virtual high five from me for now. High five.